Hi, welcome to Color Light Motion, created and hosted by Victoria Vesna. I'm Bess Rocklitzer, president of the David Vermant Foundation, and today we bring you Amber Stucke. Amber is an interdisciplinary artist based in Los Angeles, and her recent work, Talking to Plants, a sound art installation, was part of the Atmosphere of Sound installations at UCLA as part of Getty's Pacific Standard Time Art and Science Collide. Thank you all for being here. Please enjoy Amber.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 26 of Color Light Motion. Today, you will be hearing and seeing work by Amber Stucke, who is also an artist that we included in our Pacific Standard show, Atmosphere of Sound, Sonic Arts in Times of Climate Disruption. This was co-curated with Anuradha Vikram, who also joins us today, which is wonderful. We're also joined by Mark Patzpal, who is an artist and master printer from Cincinnati. And I was delighted and excited to find out that he also was for 20 years the chief designer and engineer of Namjoon Paik's work, which of course also is in the collection, Namjoon Paik. And so you can see how these nice connections come together. Amber picked Christian McClay's wind-up guitar to talk about in relation to her own work. And it's wonderful to see how she unpacks this unassuming sculpture of a guitar that's wind up that he also used in performances, Maclay, and go into his work with records. And he's actually made his name in the late 80s by creating these performances with record players. He's a player of records. And then how it connects to her recent work, Talking to Plants, which is two record players talking to each other. So you suddenly see this connection going hand in hand, and how this one artist influences another, and then it expands into something else. And that something else for Amber is really a work that's a kind of a lifetime, long-term work of looking at indigenous people and land, and how to reappropriate the language and the culture to bring it back, and how to have plants and relationships to everything that the indigenous wisdom had and still has, but needs to be brought back to light. This was a wonderful presentation, and I think you will really enjoy it. So get to it.
Okay, thank you. The kind of title I've kind of given this talk is called Sound as a Material for Reappropriation and Reclamation for Indigenous Land. So in 2013, I was introduced to Christian Marclay's work in San Francisco at the S of MoMA when his 24-hour cinematic masterpiece, The Clock, was premiered. The film is constructed from thousands of film clips indicating the passage of time, and excerpts these moments from the original context and edits them together to form a 24-hour video montage that unfolds in real time. The collage of clips reappropriates film and the notion of film format to create a new experience. This reappropriation is consistent in his work and connects to his piece, Wind-Up Guitar. Created in 1994, it was exhibited and performed by sound art historian Alan Licht in 2010 at the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York, which Marclay created open-ended scores for each performer during the exhibition. The once acoustic guitar is no longer heard as a guitar, and the idea of the music box is transformed. Known as a visual artist and composer, Marclay made his name in downtown New York scene of the early 80s, wherein serious-minded art rock mingled with nascent hip-hop and graffiti was suddenly a commodity in Soho's galleries. His initial materials were disused vinyl records adorned with paint and collage techniques, and then spun much like a DJ, but in a more radical and artified manner, contextualizing ideas of scratching and sampling within the rubric of academic composition and foreshadowing the experimental turntablism movement of the 90s. His practice eventually expanded to include the graphic score, an approach pioneered by the post-serial composers of the 50s and 60s, New Yorkers like John Cage and Morton Feldman, and widely across Europe, most expertly by Cornelius Cardew and Robin Hobenstock Ramadi, both accomplished graphic artists. Instead of notating pitches and rhythms, these composers began to offer more abstract visual cues for their performers, dots, squiggles, and boxes, allowing for a more improvisatory approach to the creation of music and a greater possibility of the unexpected. The piece Records 1981 to 1989 is a collection of Marclay's hours of home recordings, using up to 8 turntables and various other instruments of his own making, along with many live performances.
Everybody on our show tonight makes records, including our next guest. He, however, makes his out of other records. Please welcome record player Christian Marclay.
Just as Marclay was reappropriating the turntable and vinyl record, I was also inspired by the use of the reappropriation of the found cultural sonic object for my sound installation, Talking to Plants. Created in 2016 during my Curtis Gates Lloyd Research Fellowship at the Lloyd Library Museum and solo show with Clay Street Press, Talking to Plants is inspired by knowledge of how Ojibwe people talk to plants for medicine, as well as John Cage's works of chance operations and indeterminacy. Each sound piece, lath cut onto vinyl, responds to 2 questions. What is the idea of a plant, and how would you talk to it? 2 records at a time are played on twin Pioneer PL7 turntables with automatic replay, both running at the same speed. On one record is my voice, and the other record is my collaborator's voice. The piece currently has 6 records and has a continuum for a future sound archive of 50 LPs. For my research connected to Native North American uses of rhizomatic plants at the Lloyd Library, the ethnobiologist Nancy Turner, who is devoted to the indigenous peoples of British Columbia and their uses of plants, makes a case for how to understand the consciousness of plants in the minds of Native Americans. She states, Many indigenous people still hold this perspective that plants and animals are respected persons like humans. This idea has been part of indigenous peoples' understandings for hundreds, thousands of years since the beginning of time. Such perspectives represent part of a people's overarching worldview, a distinctive vision of reality, which is shaped by experiences and events in the collective lives of a people, rooted in ancestral teachings and guided by commonly held values and perspectives. At the age of 16 years old, I went to my first traditional Lakota Sioux sweat lodge and later traditional Ojibwe sweat lodge and fire ceremony, as seen in this photo. Growing up in the greater Chicago metropolitan area on the border between Illinois and Indiana, I encountered Native North American ways and ceremony. I have no Native American blood in me, but by ancestry, I'm half Polish and half German. All my personal relationships that I have made with Lakota and Anishinaabe people and their uses of plants, along with my research, inform and inspire my interdisciplinary work. The Lloyd Library gave me access to information in looking at Native American ethnobotany, specifically researching Ojibwe people and their uses of rhizomatic plants. From my research of anthropologist and ethnographer Francis Densmore's work with the Ojibwe allowed me to think and utilize sound as a drawing tool, as well as to question what is a rhizome and what is our interactions with rhizomatic relationships.
This new group of people called ethnologists in the 1880s and 1890s began collecting recordings of songs. One of these ethnologists was a woman named Frances Densmore. Over the course of her career, she recorded about 3,500 songs. Originally, she began transporting wax cylinder recording devices to reservations throughout the country.
Hey, Brian. I got the Densmore cylinder for you. You think about these Native American recordings as being perhaps the first recorded human sounds, human voices in the history of the world, then you might get a sense of how important it really is for us to get these items preserved and sustain them so other people can hear them.
Sound as a material embodies and demands an act of listening, thinking, and imagining. The research inspired the creation of my sound installation piece, Talking to Plants, with the knowledge of how Ojibwe people talk to plants for medicine. How can sound or language from the body alter plant material in the environment? What is the idea of a plant? I notate a quote from Densmore in my Talking to Plants books. It is the belief of the Ojibwe that many herbs, as well as other substances, possess the power to act without material contact, affecting the actions or conditions of human beings and animals. In order to make these substances effective, it is considered necessary to talk and pray when it was gathered. The Ojibwe refer to all such substances as medicine, indicating a belief in their extraordinary power. Talking to Plants allows for each collaborator they invite to have free range in their response in any sound format to the two questions that I asked them. What is the idea of a plant? And how would you talk to it? I never listened to the other person's piece until after it was placed onto vinyl with the use of chance operations, a process used by John Cage. I have no idea how the sounds will come together until both records are played at the same time, just as if you were talking or singing to a plant. You don't know how the plant will respond to you or how it will be altered. The collaborators that I choose include Indigenous artists, activists, and language revivalists, as well as other sound and interdisciplinary artists. Most Native American languages today are either dead or are critically endangered. Here is a clip of the piece with artist and activist Demian Dineyazi, who is Diné Navajo and identifies their self as gender non-binary.
If I ever welcomed light like you from dawn until dusk, the pre-colonial imagination of the future before the future existed, or the fear of total collapse and blackout or drought, a famine of momentum, rivers that get absorbed by the earth, oceans that are still frames, caught in romanticized photographs, and left to rot. Unwilling to cooperate with the pendulum of invented time, oceans that do not originate in clouds, documented in landscape painting.
Just as Francis Densmore's work in the early 1900s for the preservation of Native American songs, I believe there's still preservation to be continued for the voice and language of Native Americans in contemporary times. My most recent collaboration with language revivalist Sitlali Arvizu, who's Tongva, explained to me at the beginning when we met how there were minimal sound recordings from the time that Densmore was making wax cylinder recordings that documented her people's songs and teachings. Arvizu looked to me as this art piece was a small way to document and record her voice, her language, her story, and her sound for her people of the Los Angeles Basin.
Intentions. I ask this relative to let me be healed, to cover me, shelter me, to nourish me, to cleanse me, to revive me,
The language is the land. The land is the language. In 2019, I began a long-term art piece titled Instructions for Our Love. My intentions for the project is to reconnect the sound of the original Indigenous language back to the land. These intentions act as a reclamation for the sound of the language which was there before, but was taken away and is rarely or never heard today in contemporary spaces. Instructions for Our Love, Kuia, was first performed with John Pregwinkle, who is Kuia and a member of the tribal council of the Agua Caliente Band of Kuia Indians, at Mojave Sound Art in Wonder Valley, and then in 2020 at the Palm Springs Art Museum. It is a vocal piece spoken in both English by me and Kuia by John to a creosote bush, along with a book that documents the translations of the instructions. John and some of his family members made the translations. So I don't know if you can see, but I want to point out, these are the instructions that I read in English. And then this is the translation, basically how they would have, how John and his family members are also trying to translate them in Kuia. Gently touch each of my toes one by one. Begin at the top and then slowly move downward. Translated, it has to be pared down. Touch my feet. Touch slowly. I walk to you. As I walk one step closer to you, listen to our pulse, the ancient stromatolites beneath our skin. Record our carbon prints underneath us. Absorb my underground mycelial chemicals entwined with your vibrations released into tears of salt and nitrogen. Listen to my heartbeat. The old rocks listen to us. Take my tears. That translation then goes into Kuia, and this is what the language looks like. And this is what John spoke.
Samson Pasuluen Se ish Lukalyam Chishingeli Ameni Jengena Ne A Ikal Chimtaha Pataki Pa Ehangal Elelkush Hichika Ikus I.
Number 5, lips. Communicate the frequency of our resonance. Secure our skin by slowly licking every inch of branch and leaflet. Allow for our fingertips to massage each wrinkle out of every trifold. Drink the water suspended in the air while biological structures build bridges deep inside. Absorb the steam generated by our thermal coated covering as we wait 1 minute at a time. Rub the liquid electricity into our head. Repeat.
Tampa Akutashkal Neke Jempal He Nankal Chimtahawen Petakikal Balpakal Chemsun Hivinkal Ki Ioka Angapa. Chemsun.
Very recently, in October of this year, I was invited to create a performance for the Getty PST 2024-2025 UCLA Art Size Exhibition, Atmosphere of Sound, Sonic Art in Times of Climate Disruption, which is co-curated by Victoria Vesna and Anuradha Vikram. Instructions for Our Love, Tangva, was performed with Sitlauler Visu to a coast live oak tree held at Sage Hill Native Plants and Wildlife Habitat. It is a vocal piece spoken in both English by me and Tangva by Sitlauli, along with a book that documents the translations of the instructions. Both Sitlauli and Pamela Monroe, a PhD Distinguished Research Professor Emeritus of Linguistics, made the translations. So you can also see from here the translations. Again, the English is pared down. So we say, sway our synchronized legs into the wind. Pulsate our interlaced branches through exfoliating brushes of slow rhythmic motions, as each droplet of rainwater resists the oil on our coated skin. Allow the emanating heat to travel to our hands. Stand still. Breathe. 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 Translated, let's shake our legs in the wind. Let's shake our branches slowly. Rain falls on us, and our hands are hot. Stand still. Breathe, breathe, breathe. And then the Tangva translation is here, what that looks like. I would like to conclude touching on how language influences our worldview, perception, and relates to consciousness. For example, in Dene Navajo language, sentences are built around verb stems, and all nouns are divided into classes based on animacy, namely supernatural beings, humans, large animals, small animals, and inanimate objects. Indigenous language, in particular, might offer clues in how to create and think about relationships to the plant life around us. So it is, I believe, imperative to give advocacy to the preservation of Indigenous language and the sound and voice of Indigenous people speaking their language, which is a reflection and reclamation of the land. And that's where I'm going to end it.
Several things in Amber's work. One is the duality of the two voices. One which seems to be coming from a deep, deep past, and one which seems to be very contemporary. And the meshing of those voices, which seems to be trying to reconnect us to our ancient connections to the natural world. Plants as persons, almost as personalities, seems to be a way of looking at the world which we've long lost. Need I go further? Anybody there? What do you think, Amber?
Oh, look who joined us.
Oh, hey, Anu.
So, Anna, did you manage to listen to Amber's presentation?
Yeah, I've been here. Nice to see everybody. I was really moved by what you said about using the voice and language to reclaim or restitute land and place. And I was thinking about what a powerful thing that is to do on the UCLA campus, as you did for us in October. And that performative speech act that can be the first step to legal and other forms of material restitution. In our show, a lot of our focus is on physical material as a way to articulate what is very often imperceptible, but very much affects us in our world as vibration sometimes is. But in your case, you know, the material is language, which in itself is immaterial. So I think that's really fascinating and wonderful and powerful.
Thanks, Anu. Mark, did you have any other kind of reactions to? You haven't really seen some of this, the new kind of iterations too, from when it was the first time it was, you know, put together and created at Clay Street Press. And it's gone through several different, now if you saw how it looks now, there's a little more, there's been evolutions of how it's been kind of presented in a space, more as a listening room, you know, than when it was kind of putting it out there, starting, you know, at this kind of simple stage, you know, not knowing how to kind of present a listening piece, a sound piece, putting sound into my work too, which is not normal because I don't necessarily work with sound, you know, so using sound in a way that's added into my work as a material.
Well, it did when it was in my gallery and was echoing around the works that you had centered on the rhizomes and some of the pieces with like the test tubes with the extracts, with the colors.
Yeah.
And, you know, it created an atmosphere. And it kind of brings back this, my personal feeling about it was trying to connect me to that deeper place that, you know, we've lost our connection to in nature. Because those plants, even though they have medicinal qualities, they also have other qualities of beauty and connectedness to the earth, things like that. I'm kind of reminded of the fact that in a couple weeks is National Mourning Day, which is a Native American kind of celebration of bringing back their history, correcting the history, I would say, of their connectedness to America. That makes sense.
Well, lots to mourn for in relation to climate change, for sure.
Yes, exactly.
And our relationship to the earth and how disconnected we've become. Abigail, how great you joined. Thank you for taking the time. Oh, you're muted. Unmute yourself.
Yes, I've been listening. I live in the woods and the plants are chattering and interrupting the internet periodically. So, but I was really interested by, and I'm not remotely a linguist, by the idea that you were discussing in the end about the structure of the language and how that kind of the nominating case. But it was a kind of way in which the structure of the language creates a mindset. And I was wondering if you could say a little more about that.
Yeah, I'd love to. And that's just doing research also when to go and actually work and find Native people who are reviving their language and speaking it or teaching it back to their community is kind of a journey on its own. With John Preckwinkle, at the time, he's the cultural committee chair for the Agua Caliente reservation. He is a tribal council member currently. I don't know if he's on the chair anymore, but he allowed me to go and visit their classes, which are held in the casino on the reservation, to see who would be interested in working with me. Also to see how they're, teaching their language back to their community. It's free to, anybody in the community. There were children, there were, teenagers, there were grandparents, there were all kinds of people there. And it became, I went to like two classes. And after about the two classes, I got to see the comparison they have. There is mountain kuya, and then there's desert kuya. And there's, as they teach the language, the separation, if who's in the desert and who's in the mountains. And then they're separated by inflections, how you say the words. There's slight changes where if you would know who's living in the mountains and who's living in the desert. And that language is deeply connected to the land, where they're located, those plants, exactly what's been there. The creosote has been there. It's a very, very old plant. I mean, it just looks like a shrub, and it's all over the place in the desert, in around Palm Springs, around Joshua Tree, around the Coachella Valley. And it's medicinal. If you go back and you can use it, they've used it in all kinds of things. You can make a tea from it. You can use it as, a certain aromatic sense, which helps with certain things. So there's different ways they use all their plants, and their land is completely intertwined into how they structure their language and how they say their language. And then where they live and where they're from and what area and what region. And that says a lot. So the more it's also the way, what I was saying with the Dene Navajo, just the same as probably other native languages too. There's no, past tense. They only have a present tense. There's not a future tense. And that really determines the consciousness in your mind of how you see the world, how you think about the things around you. And that for me really, like, I'm interested in that, because how can we think and see and evolve and change the way we see things makes us also understand more of our environment, the things that we use, the things that we think about. So that made an impression on me, and that's the same for Lali, working with her, and Pam. They don't have words for certain things. They only see, like, plant is not like a plant. It's my relative. So that word is like, so they would have a, word made for specific for, I am talking to the coast live oak tree. But it's basically, I'm talking to my relative. This is my relative. And this is how I talk to my relative. And this is how we kind of interact. And they hold that, and it's deeply embedded in their language. And that's really, I think it's something to hold and to preserve and to keep moving forward, for how I think it's something we can learn from Native people and Indigenous people all over to those relationships, I think, are very important.
I mean, it's interesting to me also. I mean, it's kind of, do they have, do they have pronouns in the way that we have pronouns? Like, do they have gender related pronouns?
I'm not I wouldn't be the correct person to answer all the specifics for the linguistics.
It
Because
was just,
Dr. Pam Monroe, who I worked with, who is a, linguistics and has been working, she would be able to answer that question exactly correct. But I can only say I do know in Lakota Sioux, when I went to some of the ceremonies for Sundance, they have and have honored, they call them two-spirit people. They've been in their communities forever, so they don't, and I don't know, maybe it's not made by gender, by male or female. Maybe it's just to say there's two spirits. And what does that mean? And you go and well, if you have an actual dance that honors two-spirit people, there's certain things. So like in the piece, and I've talked about it before, with Dimi Dinyazi, I know that he considers himself a two-spirit person, and working with them and talking with them. I've also met other two-spirit people in Native ceremony, and there is like walking backwards and dancing backwards is a way to honor, who they are in the community. So I reversed my piece, my sound piece, just because I know in my head that I wanted to honor them. And that was like, I took one of his pieces that they wrote, and then I reversed it for me as a sign of like, this is how I want to honor this person. And I know in the sound piece. So I didn't know what they were going to make. I know they were going to use their voice. I know they were going to most likely have a spoken piece, but I know I wanted to honor that in a certain way. And that was my thought in my head.
Thank you. That was fascinating.
Actually, that brings me to the performance piece that you did at Sage Hill. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, how that relates to everything you talked about until now.
Is there any specific part of the
No, just in general, and maybe we can introduce it to the audience as well, what you did.
What was I showed it in the my presentation, introduced that was a piece with Lali Arvisu and me performed at Sage Hill, at UCLA Sage Hill Native Plants and Wildlife Habitat, which is one of the most kind of natural locations, and being conserved into uses of all native plants put onto the campus, basically, as well. They are actually consulting and in the process of working with Native people to also consult on the property of the plants to be there as well. That land has coast live oak trees, actually many coast live oak trees, which is native to California, native to, has been around for a very long time, the native tree. So they've been using the acorns connected to the tree for food, for health, medicine. There are many uses of that tree that's been used by the Tongva people of the Los Angeles basin. So I invited, well, first of all, I spoke with, I got in touch with Pam Monroe because she's been working with the Tongva community and helping to reteach their language back to them for a very long time in LA. And she's the person who got Sitlali in touch with me to see if she would be interested in working with me. They do teach classes here, it was during the time of COVID. I couldn't actually visit the classes where she was reteaching the language and how they work together and seeing it in person. I think a lot of it's done online at this point too. Because nobody was meeting in person during COVID. And from that, you know, I met up with Citlali. We went over, you know, what she thinks about doing this piece with me. It's just the same with John. I tell them where I come from and that I respect, their culture because I'm not Native, at all. And I respect these things and what we'd be doing together. And both of them who I've worked with were very much in working with me in the project and seeing that, I also, they know that there's some truth that I have from not knowing me and taking a trust and a chance of who's this person. What do I want? What are you doing? I think most artists also are not, it's very self-centered. It's not very, in a way, in a certain sense of social practice of working with a community of people, also in advocacy for the preservation of Native American language. And if they know if you're sincere about what you're doing, because it's not just like you're doing one thing and then you're, then you end it. I consider this a very long-term thing that I'm doing. So I offer to both of them. It's common and customary to offer tobacco to, somebody in the community. If you asking something in a genuine way, I respect you and I honor something from you, and offering tobacco is a way to kind of, they can accept or reject, this kind of transaction. I also paid them. It's not like I just gave them tobacco. It's like, but it's seen as a gesture, which has been passed on for a very long time for kind of a respect for Native people. So it was something that they both accepted my tobacco offer to them. And also I paid them as well as a respect that they are people also doing the translations, and they should be paid for their translations. They're also performing with me, and they should be paid for their time as a person giving their time. So these are things that, how we work together. And I would say in both situations, John has a beautiful voice, and he works very deeply culturally connected to his community. So I feel honored that he wanted to kind of reach out of his own community to do this with me. And maybe that's also an understanding too, in outreach for other people around them to know who they are, basically too. So.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Carol, did you have a question?
I had a question, yeah. I was just wondering, you chose the medium of audio as the final sort of result of your research. And I wondered, based on what you've just said, are you thinking other types of mediums to use in order to reach your goal of this, like video or other types of
I have
media?
It's because of at least for the performance stuff and the sound, it's very difficult to put it all together because I am working not with it's standard artists or something to kind of like come together and we can do this many times. It's a very one-off thing in a certain way. So from the first time I did it at Mojave Sound Art, and then I did it again at Palm Springs Art Museum, I realized I really need to have a film. It needs to be filmed where it happens in the specific region. So I did get, if you saw in the last video, actually, which is not the best video, because I am working on the film for Instructions for I Love Tongva, and made an effort to make sure that it would be filmed and put into a film format where it can be exposed more so people can see it. Otherwise, it becomes very complicated as a performer. It can only happen maybe once or twice, or it's just not as readily available in a lot of ways, which it should be, so people can hear the sound of the language, too. And people can go back and look, and there's a book connected, and it has all the translations that document, their language, the documents, the piece, the documents, that whole kind of interaction that took place.
Well, I just think that the audio is quite significant, and it makes quite a wonderful impression because of the nature of the language. I mean, I'm happy with it for sure.
Yeah, there's one. I'm definitely working on it. It's a work in progress to evolve I think, to capturing sound. Film is just one way, I mean, obviously it's the visual, you're seeing it's done in front of an actual plant, because it's the sound connected to the land. So it's to a tree, or it's to a bush, it's to the native plant. So you're having the sound in that connection. Again, going back to, if you pray or if you talk to the plant, that sound that, coming out of your voice, you're giving that energy from your body to that physical tree or to that plant. And what is happening, with that interaction. And it's not like you would see the tree's not going to talk to you, but it's going to have a language that's, it's going to give something back, that maybe that medicine does alter your body, or maybe, there's something more, that if that tree is a being, it's going to have something else that's interacting with you beyond that human understanding that we don't know in our human language.
Wonderful.
That actually could be done very well in digital media if you didn't have to concentrate on the represented image, right? The tree. It could be color. It could be an animation. It could be. It's lots of possibilities.
I think it's great, and I really appreciate that it's a very long-term project, that you don't see it as something that's a piece, it's done, it's shown, and then you move on to the next thing. And we can see that progression and the evolution, because it's a kind of a commitment, really, that you made to the people and the language. And you don't want to suddenly disappear from that community because you're done. There's a lot there. That's important also to relate to younger artists who tend to think of little bits and snippets and quickly moving on to the next thing. That there's a lot to be said about taking a subject that becomes part of your life learning that then you share with others as you're progressing in it, and in relation with all the current social, economic, all complexities of our society, including the art and cultural world. So that's really an important thing to put out there. Appreciate that, Amber.
Yeah, I would definitely continue with it. So
yeah, and I can tell, and that's why I said this. So Mark, do you have any more words to say before we finish today? As our special guest.
Thank you. I've learned a lot, I must say, from Amber.
Yeah, so you showed Amber's piece a long time ago, right? In the gallery. you can maybe say a couple of words about that, and then we'll make a full circle back.
Yeah, I mean, before Mark, I mean, it was not only which I didn't show in this presentation, but Mark and I worked on prints, blind letter press prints together,
Uh-huh.
which were in the show.
Embossings. They're
Emboss.
basically embossings. Yeah.
Embossed. Ah, okay, nice.
So
So
there were prints without ink. And so
so embossment, so you could feel it. It's something that you were invited to touch, I'm assuming, or am I assuming wrong?
it leaves a sculptural impression on the paper. So
Got it.
Right.
Amber created drawings that of rhizomes and other plants, root-based plants that were medicinal to the native peoples, and we basically etched those into a plate so that it was deep enough when we ran it through the press without ink. It left that impression there, and it's a very tactile kind of a print.
Oh, wonderful. Maybe we'll add a picture of that when we edit this piece.
Yeah, I can send you one. Sorry, yeah, I can send you one. They
Okay.
they're actually it was put into the catalog for Atmosphere of Sound too.
That's right.
Which is there are 4 prints, and the titles were related to Anishinaabe relationships. So they were based on looking at rhizomatic native plants that Ojibwa people were using or are just still use. And then I altered them in my own way, making drawings from them and then put them into blind letter press prints or embossings, basically. And they look like scientific prints. It's to kind of also alter the way we think about art and science, appropriating the scientific format, saying this is, truth, but it's not, it's not real. What do we make as real? What is truth and what is not real? And there is bringing back things of curiosity. That's also a part of how do we stretch our understandings of what science is, how we think of the use of material still today. So that isn't done with scientific methods.
That's right. And so, do you do workshops, hands-on workshops, field trips, or foraging and things like that? It seems to me like it would be a wonderful thing to take a bunch of students on a field trip, or just foraging around and talking about plants and rhizomes and everything you're immersed in.
Yeah, I'm not currently, I don't have anything scheduled, but yes, I do.
You have done it in the past?
Yes, I have. Mainly, I haven't had any opportunity since I've been here in LA, but when I was teaching actually in Cincinnati, Ohio for 3 years, there were many workshops that I set up, working with people in the community for collecting plants and placing them into books and then identifying them and then using their language to identify the plants. So it says, well, how would they identify the plants in their own language too? Because there weren't just, there were all kinds of people coming to the workshops.
Right, right. Beautiful. We'll have to arrange something. I love that idea.
We could do that.
That sounds good. So, Bess, thank you again for having us host this and continue these dialogues. We learned so much more about both the pieces in the collection and then the lineage and the connections of people like Mark and Cincinnati and Carol's and Harvest Works. And yeah, it's just wonderful. I'm always energized by these meetings. Thank you for supporting it.
Yes, thank you, Amber. That was so enjoyable. You have a beautiful voice. So the presentation is so pleasurable to listen to, very soothing and hypnotic and meditative.
That's good.
So I'm going to get out there and talk to my plants. I have a few that need a little, thank you for the reminder.
And we can join Amber's future workshop and learn how to talk to plants.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good plan.
Yes. Thank you, everybody.
Nice to
And
see you
thank
all.
those who joined currently and in the future. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Mark.